And in summary, too, let's just look again at what the court has actually done here. What the court has done is the thing that we have been arguing here in the at Arizona's for Transparency and Accountability in Corrections. What has the court said? A, we need sunlight, right? We have to have transparency before we can have accountability. There's a reason why it's Arizona's for Transparency and Accountability in Corrections. In order to get that accountability, you first have to have transparency. And in order to create that transparency, you need to have people in there that are objective, that do not have a subjective benefit for them to say one thing or the other, for them to objectively go in there and say, okay, here's a set of rules. Is the Department of Correction applying these rules equally, fairly, and justly to everybody in here? And that's what the monitors have to do. So, but first, we need people to go in there. So this judge has created basically ombudsmen who are able to go in. This is what those monitors are for the court. They're basically acting as an ombudsman. They're going to go in there. They're going to monitor. They're going to investigate. They're going to research issues. They're going to accept complaints from family, friends, and staff. And they're going to investigate those issues and turn over and create reports and provide objective information to the court. That's the point. So exactly like the legislation that we propose, what we're saying too, the first thing is we need an independent external ombudsman to be able to go in to research, have confidential conversations, and to investigate what's really happening in the Department of Corrections. We need the light, we need the sunlight, we need the transparency. Then we need to have accountability, and the accountability is in what the court sets forth here. The court is ordering the Department of Corrections to hire monitoring staff. They are ordering them to hire medical staff. They are ordering them to ensure that there is sufficient mental health staff. They are ordering them to ensure that there is a prison expert that understands solitary confinement and the excessive use of solitary confinement, and to provide information regarding that issue. And the court is setting forth specific metrics that have to be met for the court to determine that the Department of Corrections is operating under constitutional standards. In our legislation, for our oversight legislation, we're arguing much of the same thing. We also have the the citizen-led legislative oversight, prison oversight committee in our legislation. That's unique in this country. Most of the other systems in the country only have the ombudsman or have some sort of other mechanism, nonprofit mechanism, some other thing. Ours has an amalgamation of best practices. The legislation that we support has the ombudsman to be able to go in there and to do that investigation, get those reports, bring out that information, and shine a light in there. And the second part of our legislation is much like the second part of this court order, which is we have a legislative committee that is put together with actual citizens, directly impacted individuals that were in prison and understand what's going on there. Members of both parties from both chambers, the House and the Senate, a prison expert that's worked like an administrator, a warden, those type of individuals, a doctor, a mental health professional, a member of the Correction Officers Union so that they can be represented and have a voice. All of those are on this panel to receive that information from the ombudsman and turn that into policy ideas and specific laws for the state of Arizona, and to report to the governor, because remember, prisons are an executive agency. They are the governor's agents. So providing that necessary information to the governor as well, so that the governor can have the director implement policy changes to be more consistent with the governor's ideas of how prisons should be run. So we need all of that. Basically, what the court has done here is exactly what we are arguing about in our legislation. It's the only thing that can be done in these situations. Prisons are unique in our system of governance. They're the only thing besides military bases that are closed off entirely to the outside. You do not have any regular ingress, egress into these facilities. The public can't just walk into a prison. And so that function means that there's only really two people telling stories about the Department of Corrections. And those two people are adversarial, right? It's the incarcerated and the administrators. And staff many times can't come out and tell these stories because they're constrained by policy. So there's three groups at play in any prison. There's the administration of the prison, there's the incarcerated, and there's the line staff. And the line staff and the incarcerated are the ones that have to deal. Both sides are on the side of both sides of the cell door. They're the ones that have to deal with these bad conditions and all of the ancillary problems that those things create. The administration is usually sitting up in some nice office here downtown Phoenix, 150, 250, 300 miles away from any of these prisons, and they get to make decisions like that, and they don't, by fiat, and they don't feel the impact of them. And so, but many times this party down here, the staff party, they are constrained from discussing these issues by their employment terms. And we saw Director Shin come in, and that was one of the first things that he did was clamp down on that, because the whole Lewis Locke debacle that embarrassed Governor Ducey and caused Tequila Chuck to run out the door. The reason that happened was because a staff member, Gabby Contreras, sergeant, got that footage out and got it to the media. And so they can't have that. And we've had other staff whistleblowers come out talking about the computer system failures in the Department of Corrections, talking about the systemic failure at Lewis Complex and the fact that it's on the brink of collapse. And because we talk about with masks relative to COVID and, again, the Lewis Locke events. The deputy warden over at Lewis that got fired as a whistleblower, and all of it. So of the three parties, that just leaves the administration and the incarcerated to tell these stories. And of course, everybody has been conditioned to always not believe anything an inmate is saying or an incarcerated person is saying. And these administrations, they have their whole public relations teams, and they've got experts up there who professionally go and create these narratives that go out to the public that everything is okie dokie, that they are the only line between chaos, anarchy, and public safety, and that, if we challenge them at all, then we are reducing public safety, when in fact we need to challenge them because they are indeed reducing public safety in our prisons, that they are systemically failing to the point where it's causing the public to be harmed by that, as well as the incarcerated and the staff members in there. And we see that with all the news reports that have come out in the last 3 years, primarily reported on by Jimmy Jenkins at the Arizona Republic. So these things are all, this is the movie, right? If we provide these conditions, if we put a prison together, and then we do the things that we've done here with this prison, where we overpopulate it, we come in with all these high-minded privatization things and put a profit model on all of the services and operations around it, and then we flip the incentive to extract as much profit out of this class of people that is being oppressed under the 13th Amendment slavery doctrine set forth in the United States Constitution, and then we put a profit model on top of them and incarcerate them, and then take away any incentive to rehabilitate and get out of prison earlier, and just basically use them as slave chain gangs for private entities out here in the free world to have free, really cheap labor. Then these things, the exact things that we're seeing, are going to play out. And we've seen it play out in other states. It was all easy to call in advance. And many people did. Just go back and look at the work of Caroline Isaacs at American Friends Service Committee in 2010 and 11 and 12, screaming from the top of her lungs, if we privatize healthcare, we're going to have problems, and it's all a lie. And that's exactly what happened. And the Republican legislature did it anyways. They shoved it down the throats. They also privatized food services. They provided privatized mail and telephone services. They privatized commissary services, and then healthcare services. And that has caused untold damage to the Department of Corrections. and resulted in the death of many people, and has resulted in the reincarceration recidivism of many people. And it's been, on balance, a horrible thing that's happened in our state. And it's time to remediate these things. And because our legislature has literally no courage of any conviction whatsoever and continued to kick the can down the road, this is what happened. A class action lawsuit comes out. The court sees these truths that we have been saying, that have been being lied about by this administration, and these facts that have been disbelieved by people because they were coming out of the mouths of the incarcerated. And finally, some people listened and went in and took a look, and turned out that it was exactly what the incarcerated were saying, and much, much, much worse. And that's resulted in this huge, historic lawsuit that's happened here. And we haven't gone into that, but the history of this lawsuit and what's happened in this lawsuit in the era of the Prison Litigation Reform Act is absolutely amazing, remarkable, and novel. And this has been a historic suit. So